those of you who don't know, my background is in TechCom, and I've spent a lot of time building tools for TechCom people, so I kind of live on the documentation code boundary. Which means I spend a lot of time in XML, which I loathe and despise and hate. Who votes for loathing, despising, hating XML? There we go. And as we all know, Markdown has made considerable progress. But the problem with Markdown is it isn't structured, it's just an analog for HTML. So I thought, what if we could come up with a format for structured documentation that uses essentially Markdown-like syntax. The intent here isn't to be a complete replacement for XML, because that would be horrendous, but just to do as little as possible and still be able to create documentation that has structure. And that essentially means being able to name blocks, being able to annotate things inline in the text. So this is what I've been working on, trying to come up with a syntax that feels natural. And my question here is, does the syntax feel natural? Because I can go through this briefly, but essentially, I mean, if you've seen YAML, it's borrowing a lot from YAML. So we introduce a block with a name and a colon, and then that can be nested. Here I've got something I'm calling a record, which is simply instead of one colon, there's two, and then there's a series of values which become the field names, and then anything that follows in just comma-separated values underneath that becomes the fields that are in that first line. So here, for a history of this file, each revision consists of a date, author, comment, status, and then just like that.
So can you have more than one fill in for the record there?
Yeah. So
okay.
The next one is an example of that.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So yeah, it would be as many as you like for that record then. As far as annotations go, basically any piece of text you want to annotate, you put in square brackets, which is very similar to Markdown with how it does links and to how wiki markup works. And then whatever the annotation is, you put in parentheses immediately after, no space between. That's why, so we can tell regular parentheses apart without having to have fancy markup. This will, in the future, actually support three things here. So, for instance, here, this is saying this phrase refers to a task. If I wanted to clarify that, I could trying to type in the dark, which I should be able to do. My typing teacher would be horrified that I cannot. So you can put, the first thing is the type. If you want to have a clarifying phrase, then you put it in quotes. And again, this is really trying to do as much as possible with the natural way people would clarify something in a text anyway. So frequently, if you want to clarify something in a text, you will put parentheses and explain what you have put. And if you want to say, I mean literally this, you use quotation marks. So this is the sort of the canonical phrase. And then finally, with a second set of parentheses, you can specify a namespace, which I can't think of one for this, but. And that is essentially giving you three fixed attributes. So type, canonical name, namespace. And that is basically all the attributes you can do. And if you want to do something like a link, well, link is the type, the canonical could then be the URL. So It's a bit flexible that way, but it's not in any way attempting to give you a complete rundown. And the reason I'm taking that out because I haven't actually written the piece of the parser that does those second two attributes yet. So we have, it just continues. Paragraphs are separated by spaces, by blank lines. This is here to show that we can recognize that this isn't, if we want to have a literal square bracket, proceed with a backslash. You want to have a literal backslash, proceed with a backslash. Star is bold. Underscore is italic. That doesn't quite follow Markdown practice because I think the 1 star, 2 star thing doesn't make sense. Underline means italic. It's what we used to use underline to mean, the typewriter. So code blocks, 3 backticks, and then the name of the language that's being shown so that you could do code coloring and what have you. There isn't currently actual table markup because you can essentially use the record markup to do tables. So here, using the record markup, so there's a table, it consists of rows, the rows consist of cells, and that will give me table markup in the output XML. Lists, bulleted lists done with stars, just as in Markdown. Numbered lists done with numbers, it doesn't actually matter what numbers you use. And just more paragraphs. So if the demo gremlins haven't got into my computer since I left home, I run this, and there is my XML. So as a midway between doing unstructured text in Markdown and trying to do structured text in XML, does it make sense?
As far as I've seen.
Yeah.
That looks interesting. I think I was thinking of doing something, looking at the micro HTML semantic web coding stuff.
Yeah.
Microforms.
Yeah.
I've been looking at using various ones in the H resume, and I was sort of thinking of using YAML with like classes on it to do it that way. But this might be nicer. This might be like less, have to add less other stuff onto it. But it would be interesting. It might be interesting to compare the two and put them side by side and see how they fit better. What's nice. What works better on either side.
Yeah. This is very much about saying, figuring out how little can I do. Right? It's not about how many features can I add, it's how many can I take away, because the big problem for structured text is people just hit this wall and it's just vastly complicated and people won't go past it. So I'm trying to find the way that I can extend the franchise beyond a few dozen tech writers in the organization and actually get anybody else to do anything structured. So,
would it be hard to generate HTML out of it? I assume you've done XML so far.
Yeah, and I think the thing you do is generate the HTML from the XML would be the normal structured writing way of going about it.
If you just wanted unstructured HTML, though, I mean, it's got
tags.
Tags are tags, and it's got pseudo Markdown. You're basically there already, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not basically there. You are there.
Yeah.
You can't do arbitrary HTML attributes. That would be the only thing. Like you can do class names with it.
Yeah, it's the lack of arbitrary attributes that really is pushing it into not only the structured domain, but this particular style of structured markup, which is that you annotate things by explicating their names, and that you're supposed to derive everything else from that. And there's a few things you could work around with having those 3 attributes. There's actually an awful lot of stuff you could do with just those 3 without too violating the spirit of what their semantics is supposed to be. But yeah, I mean, you could generate HTML from it in a quite straightforward way. Now, the thing that you have to deal with a little bit is it doesn't necessarily have titles. It can, I didn't actually note this as I was going, but this starts with a body tag, and then that actually becomes a title. But you could have structures in this that's where the tag stands in place of a title. Because that's a common thing in structured writing, that you take the titles out, you abstract them out into the structure itself.
Yeah.
So if you've done that, then your HTML transform gets a little bit problematic. But you could have a default version of this that essentially did the same thing Markdown did, because Markdown doesn't give you everything HTML does either. So.
Could you scroll to where the records were spit out? I just kind of...
Oh, in the output?
Yeah.
So that's...
Okay, so it's sub-items.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and so index, yeah, so then you get an entry which consists of type and term.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, yeah, here, but that's the table one, so table row, 3 cells, that corresponds to that. Because, you know, doing actual tables in ASCII text is just horrible.
Yeah.
So, and
comma separated values are pretty close to a table.
yeah,
So it's like works nicely with the fact that you already have that syntax anyway.
yeah, and this is it. Just trying not to have any weird, unfamiliar syntax. So, I mean, the names followed by colons that's not just YAML. It's all kinds of stuff. That's what people do on a regular basis. So it's the same spirit as Markdown, right? Just borrow existing syntax as much as possible and do as little as you can. David.
Cool.
Yeah. So right now the parser is pretty much running on index. And the indentation all has to be correct. Once there's a schema there that says what block to expect, then a lot of the indenting can be incorrect and it'll still work. But all I'm doing, I found this like 30-line state machine thing and borrowed it, and there's 300 lines in, well, there's 400 lines because I've got a separate parser for the paragraphs. So this is all it's doing. Let's see. Essentially, state machine that you just feed it states and the code that processes the states. You've got a set of patterns that detect the common patterns using, and it's totally line-based. This is not, you know, if you're doing an XML parser, you've got to deal with the fact that you can have infinitely nested stuff. This is line by line, so I never have to parse more than a line and sort of say, what does the next line mean for what just happened? What do I have to pop off the stack? That's basically it. So, this is how the state machine works. So you run the state machine, and you know, first state is new file. It checks to see if it's a SAM document, semantic authoring markup. Also a kind of homage to my mentor in all things structured writing, this guy called Sam Wilmot, who just loves to spend his time inventing programming languages. Every time I get on the phone with him, is, "What are you doing, Sam?" "I'm inventing a programming language." So, and then it just returns the state. So very few exceptions built in. Right now, this code will successfully parse correct SAM. Its ability to detect errors is not determined at this time.
Something might happen.
So I don't know what else is interesting about this. It's just a series of things that process based on what you said, mostly just by pattern matching a line. And then there is, what I did was create a dot structure class, and I push elements onto it based on the counting of the current indent. So, because there are no end tags, so it counts indents until such time as there is a parser available, as there is a schema language available, at which point it will be less dependent on that. and then just pushes out, push element actually returns the tag, so you can print it. And pop element just pops it off the stack, returns the tag. Shelf of elements and a list of elements, and that's pretty much it. And then paragraph parser is kind of works similarly. Annotation start, bold start, italic start, that's all it has to detect, and escape characters. So it's all pretty minimal. And a class could just keep track of the paragraph. That's all it is.
So one more. So the schema part that you haven't done yet,
Yeah.
is essentially, is that going to say, like, I found a head and I wasn't expecting a head here, but I was expecting one 2 levels up, so I guess it's that one? Is that, or by head I meant an arbitrary tag, like any tag name?
No, I don't think it's going to be that smart.
Oh, okay.
No, it's basically going to say, yeah, fine, no.
Oh, okay, that's fine too.
Yeah, that's no, I don't plan for it to be because with structured text you don't particularly want to have it to be that forgiving. You actually want it to be strict.
Okay, that's what I was confused about. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's not like this is not for displaying. This is for wrapping the knuckles of the author by having done it right. So yeah, it will, as far as possible, it will look very much like a document. Actually, the schema would be very close to that, because again, this is the kind of complex schema languages that are used in XML is not something that your average information architect is really going to learn to do. So I want to be able to say, okay, just sketch it out. What's the outline of your document, and put in a few type statements, and that's your schema. Again, it's about doing as little as possible. So I'll so one of these in the future, I'll show you what I've done with the schema.